Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is socialism is only the first step to communism, but I'm going to say it this way. There is no socialism. No, there really is not any socialism. Socialism really is only the first step of communism. Socialism is only getting the foot in the door. It's getting the nose of the camel into the tent so that the camel can follow, and the camel being communism. Communism being taking over freedom and doing as they please. Now, I've got some articles today, and it's all in the last day or so. Shocking. Terrifying. Watch these DSA members describe the goals themselves of their movement in their own words. Socialists of America describing their goals. This is what they say. Now, this article is going to talk about communist insurgents, radicalized Marxist revolutionaries hiding behind personal ideologies to justify their 1A expressions of the right to promote the insurrection of the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. In other words, they are actively calling for what Dimitri Duduman was told that the fall of America would start with an internal revolution. They're openly calling for an internal revolution in America. Sad to say, they're not just the bums on the corner. These people are winning elections. Now, I'm about to show you a video, and it's going to show you these people actually saying it. But before I show you the video, I want to read for you so you get an actual chance to really see what they're about to say and think about what they're about to say. They say, and we have a unique responsibility to act from the heart of empire, the belly of the beast. They're calling America the belly of the beast. That's what they're calling us. The most important thing that we can do is to take that empire down from within. They're openly calling for the destruction of the democratic constitutional republic of the United States. Our role, ultimately, is to facilitate our own empire's, what's the own empire? Communism. Destruction of America. Facilitate our own empire's failure in ways that we can ultimately overthrow our own empire. Imperialism is us. They're openly calling for an insurrection, an internal revolution, the destruction of the government of the United States. Here's the last one. Imperialism is not a thing that can be reformed away. They're saying you can't solve it by ballot. You can't solve it by peaceful means. Not a thing that can be reformed away. It has to be overthrown, what they're saying is, through bullet and blood. It has to be overthrown through revolutionary struggle. There's that communism word. You'll hear that a lot now. Struggle. And to build a mass movement that can use the leverage of workers, the leverage of illegal immigrants that Biden let in over the last 4 years, to build a mass movement that can use the leverage of illegal immigrants, I'm going to say it that way, to hit the kill switch on American imperialism. What's American imperialism? In other words, if you're doing well, you're an imperialist, okay? The American imperialism, here within the American empire, here, out of their own mouth, what they plan. Here it is.
And we have a unique responsibility to act from the heart of empire, the belly of the beast. The most important thing that we can do is take that empire down from within.
Our role ultimately is to facilitate our own empire's failure in ways that we can, ultimately to overthrow our own empire.
U.S. imperialism is not a thing that can be reformed away. It has to be overthrown through revolutionary struggle.
And to build a mass movement that can use the leverage of workers to hit the kill switch on American imperialism here within the American empire.
Now let's go on to the rest of the article. This is still the same article. The Democratic Socialists of America just adopted a radical new platform. Earlier this month, the Democratic Socialists of America's top leadership met for an in-person, this is not Zoom call. Okay, why do they meet in person? Because they're saying some things that they don't want anyone to know. For an in-person meeting in their National Political Committee, the DSA's governing authority. The result of the meeting was workers deserve more. Okay, that's the standard line of the communism. They get the workers to rise up above the government. Standard play, okay? Workers deserve more. A rebooted platform from the organization featuring a host of radical proposals. The document commits DSA to scrapping the U.S. Senate. My opinion, that's close to treason. I don't know what needs to be done. Somebody needs to be arrested, kicked out, deported or something. Anybody that says that, hit the road. Love it or leave it. That's my opinion. The document commits DSA to scrapping the U.S. Senate, abolishing, are you listening? Abolishing the carceral forces. Should have looked that up. Abolishing the carceral forces of the capitalist state, defunding the Department of War, amnesty for all immigrants. Why do they want that? Because the immigrants are going to be the people that are going to be fighting against the Christians, really. This is really the takeover of the last Christian nation. That's what this is. Amnesty for all immigrants and replacing the president and the Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen by them, basically. Goes on to say, the same article, another on police and prison abolition. Okay, what would happen if you did away with the police and the prisons? You would have chaos. What is the phrase, excuse me, on the front of the book, Morals and Dogma? The answer is ordo ab chaos. That's Latin. What does that mean? That means order out of chaos. What chaos? A chaos they want to create. What order? A new world order with Satan at the top. Okay, so if you don't destroy the old order, then why bring in the new? How can you bring in the new? It's been said, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So what they have to do first is break the old system to bring in a new system. Another on police and prison abolition, a provision of explicitly naming Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state. So they're not talking about just destroying America. They're talking about destroying Israel too, which of course will never happen. And a ranked choice voting section. Okay, wait a minute. Ranked choice? In other words, the people they say get to vote. Oh, but in capitalist countries, they want to say, everybody gets to vote. Everybody, you can use mail-in ballots. Okay. In other words, it's destruction of an organized society. But in their society, they want to choose who gets to vote. They do think we're stupid. And sad to say, to a certain degree, we are. The NPC passed 2 of these 4 amendments unanimously, while the real democracy provision prevailed at a razor-thin margin. Workers deserve more, is their cry. Has revolutionary aspirations. It aims to win the battle for democracy, draft a new constitution, wouldn't be one based upon freedom, where all people are created equal, okay, and create a democratic socialist republic. No, create a communist nation. The document makes clear that achieving this vision would require building a new society from the ground up, meaning you got to destroy the total America, and to destroy America, what you have to do is kill all the Christians. It would also defund the Department of War. Why? Because the devil is in the house, okay? Close overseas bases. That way we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves or our allies. And in all economic sanctions, that way we can prosper in our own evil, which would include those in the states like Iran, Cuba, and Russia. The platform further endorses universal amnesty for illegal immigrants. That's right, come one, come all, because we're destroying the last Christian nation, and we're destroying all the Christians. And ending restrictions on marriage, which would presumably entail the legalization of polygamy. It gets worse. This is not even the end of it. So the story goes on. Breaking. Police officer reveals that 350 FBI agents were ready to be deployed on January 6th. What? Well, what was really going on, in my opinion, if the Biden-Pelosi team had officers in or out of uniform on the January 6th site, to me it says that they could have prevented the problems, but since they didn't, it says to me that they were actually, their plan, now I can't prove this, my opinion, their plan on January 6th was actually to start an internal revolution, not Biden Pelosi, but the Trump supporters were supposed to be starting an internal revolution. Now, the problem is they weren't angry, they weren't upset, okay? But that was their objective, or at least make it look like one so they could start rounding people up and killing them. Can't prove that, but probably. Okay, let's go on. As the Gateway Pundit previously reported, same article, dozens, if not hundreds of government operatives from numerous agencies and departments infiltrated the protest at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. The Gateway Pundit previously identified that 20 different confirmed incidents and operations involving federal, state, local government operatives who infiltrated the massive Trump crowds on January 6th. In other words, they were intentionally trying to stir up trouble, trying to get the Trump MAGA supporters to raise up against the government, start an internal revolution so they could crush it. My opinion. Can't prove that. My opinion. In September 2022, TGP learned that the FBI was running operatives inside the Oath Keepers on January 6th. In other words, it wasn't just on the Capitol. It's other places, too. What they do is send in, what do you call them? What do you call them when they go in? People to stir up trouble. People to put things in people's minds, anger that wasn't there. They're running confidential human sources inside the Oath Keepers organization on January the 6th. In November 2022, the FBI finally admitted that they had 8 informants inside the Proud Boys organization on January 6th, and likely more. Why? They were turncoats. They were trying to start trouble. My point is, it appears that the real objective of January 6th was to start an internal revolution, which they would then crush. Let me remind you that Dmitry was told the fall of America would start with an internal revolution in America started by the communists. Now, in 1984, when I first heard it in 1988, there was no communists. There was no communist threat. Well, not to speak of anyway. But today, they're now winning elections, as we're about to talk about. So, is the real objective of allowing open borders to bring in people who will be willing to fight in the internal revolution? Is that the real objective? Communism is growing in America. First comes socialism, then comes communism, and your rights, I'm going to say, no, your heads go with it. It's more than just rights. It's more than just right to have arms or to speak freely. It's the right to have a beating heart and breathing lungs. The socialist upset in Denver is not just another primary. It is the signpost on a road the world has traveled before, many times, and the historical record already tells us in detail and in blood where that road leads. Where does communism lead? Well, why the people keep cheering loudest for it are the ones least willing to say the destination out loud. What is the destination? Socialism was never conceived as a stopping point. Let me say it again. Socialism is not the stopping point. It's the first step. First step toward communism. In theory, that gave the movement its name. It is explicitly a stage of transition. Somebody's say it again. Socialism is a step. It's a stage of transition from socialism to communism. A way station on the road to something further. In his critique of the Gothic program, Karl Marx laid out 2 phases of the society he envisioned. First, a lower phase that later writers came to call socialism, and the higher phase, full communism. I didn't write that. Those are words of Karl Marx. Toward which the first was always meant to progress. Vladimir Lenin, the Russian, in State Revolution made the sequence explicit and operational. Socialism is the lower stage. Communism, the higher stage. I'll say it this way. Socialism is the first step. Communism is the goal. Socialism is the foot in the door. Communism is the boot on the neck. I remember one of our first speakers in Prophecy Club said the average American will not wake up until there's a boot on their neck. Sadly, he's right. Marx had called the dictatorship of the proletariat a period in which the machinery of the state is used to crush the old order and prevent its return. The boot on the neck. Breaking, Democratic Socialists of America surpasses 120,000 members, making it the largest socialist organization in American history. It is now a better time to be a socialist in America than ever before. Why? Because Americans don't want to receive Jesus, read their Bible, pray, go to church. They want a world without God. So what God is going to do is send them a strong delusion, so that all those that not come to knowledge the truth would believe the lie and be damned. Sadly, most of them will swallow it, hook, line, and sinker. Ben Carson says, normalizing communism is treasonous. What? He says, this has been planned for a long time. Excuse me, taking over the school systems and teacher unions, inculcating communist thinking into our young people, changing the culture in America, denigrating our relationship with God. All of these things were pre-planned. Yeah, actually, truth be known, probably right after Adam and Eve ate of the apple, which probably not an apple, by the way. Mike Johnson warns many Mamdanis are coming. He says New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani poses a threat to American governance. He says he's a serious threat to our whole system of government, casting the movement as a fundamental challenge to American political tradition rather than a routine ideological drift within the opposite party. In other words, this is not your other Democrat. This is not your father or your grandfather's Democrat. This is communism. This is what our boys shed their blood on the battlefield in World War II to stop. Oh, yeah, no, that was Nazism. Same thing. Same thing. Cuba's surveillance state keeps Communist Party afloat. This article tells us because of a sprawling internal surveillance apparatus in Cuba, this is how the Cubans keep control in Cuba. It's communist. And you want to know how well communism works? Look at Cuba. That's a communist state. There's many other examples. Taiwan military resumes anti-communist classes for graduates. So Taiwan apparently used to teach how communism was bad, got away from it probably during the Obama-Biden era, but now they're back to it because they hear what Trump is saying and they see what's going on. Revolution can actually start quickly and easily. So what could start an internal revolution? It could be that simply there's a protest, a bullet flies from one side to the other, hits the other side, and all of a sudden somebody says, oh, you going to do that? Well, I'm going to pull out my shooting iron too. And all of a sudden, we have a big problem. Just that quick. Matter of fact, frankly, I'm really kind of surprised that I haven't already seen bullets flying from at least one side to the other. Now, I have to say, I was impressed to dig this one up. And I don't think I ever got a total understanding on this one until just today. I think I got revelation on this, even though I had read it many times through the years. So I'm going to give you the revelation. I think it's astounding. It's very important, and it's speaking into us today. So it was 1991. Dimitri Duduman said, I prayed and went to sleep. While I was sleeping, I dreamed someone was telling me rain is coming. Now, you have to understand that God doesn't tell us exactly what is going on. He speaks in types and shadows. You have to hear by the Spirit what he's saying. So what's the first question? Rain is coming. What's he saying? What he's saying is war is coming. Now, we're not talking about World War I, World War II, Korea War, Vietnam. We're not talking about that kind. We're talking about a big, bad one. A war between Christendom and communism. So he goes on to say, I looked around but saw no one, but suddenly there was thunder and lightning, and a red cloud appeared. What's the red cloud? In this example, it's talking about communism. It's talking about the rise of communism. So he sees the rise of communism. In the midst, I saw the hammer and sickle of communism. So there's no question. The red cloud is talking about communism. In this mist were the hammer and sickle of communism. On the other side was a cloud, but with no unusual colors. Suddenly, an intensely bright star appeared out of the cloud. Then the red cloud began to surround the cloud with the star. What's the bright star? That would be America. So communism is starting to surround capitalism. Essentially, that's what it's talking about. Suddenly, an intensely bright star, America, appeared out of the cloud. Then the red cloud began to surround the cloud with the red star. Excuse me, the cloud with the star. I believe that's talking about America, and tried to capture it. So it's saying that communism surrounds capitalism. Communism surrounds America and tries to capture it. That's where we are right now. Immediately, a white cloud appeared, bursting forth with great thunder and lightning. And what would that be? That's talking about the return of Jesus. When it appeared, the red cloud was dismembered. That's when Jesus returns on the clouds, rolls back the heavens like a scroll. He's riding on a white horse, on his vesture and on his thighs, a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And with the breath of his nostrils, he destroys all of the enemies of the earth. That's what it's talking about. Now, there's more to the dream. Then two men appeared out of the white cloud. One had a face like the sun. It was so bright I could not look at it. The other had a humble face and had a book in his hand. He opened the book and said, "Look." He began to count the blank pages of the book. There were only 3 1/4 empty pages. It won't be long. Be prepared. When these pages are filled, the grace will leave the Gentiles. Draw closer to me now more than ever and be holy, because hard times are coming. Then the man with the book said, "Look to the right." When I looked to the right, I saw a beautiful garden filled with all kinds of flowers that I'd never seen any of these kinds before. What's he saying? That Jerusalem will be trodden down to the Gentiles till the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. There's a time coming when those days are gone, and I'll get to that in a second. In October 2006, I invited Kitty Worthman to come and speak, and I thought it was an excellent talk. It's called Freedom to Dictatorship in 5 Years, and you can go to watchprophecyclub.com and watch it. And I think they give you the first 3 days free, so you can go watch it right now for free. Go watch it. Got 160 guest speakers, over 300 some odd DVDs up there for $20 a month. Great deal. Excuse my coughing today. Freedom to Dictatorship in 5 Years. So this tells about her story. She says she shows that the U.S. is walking down the same path as the time of the Nazi occupation in World War II, which is basically communism taking over. Different name, same rules. When she was 12 years old, living in Austria, there was order, prayer, pictures of Jesus. Hitler took over and all that was removed in one day, she said. I remember saying that. Unemployment rose to 35%, bank loans rose to 25%, unions called strikes, all this with 98% of the people claiming to be Catholic. In other words, just because you're a Christian doesn't necessarily stop it. You got to be real Christians. Soon there was massive welfare. Cries went out for equal rights for women. Socialism took women out of the home, raising the children, and to put them into factories. They took the children away from the family and raised them by the state to be little Hitlers, okay? Then the health department offered training for the elderly and started rounding them up. But they just killed the elderly. If they couldn't work, they weren't productive society, they just killed them. Now, let me go back to a point I was making a second ago. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, they shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trodden down to the Gentiles till the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. But to really understand that, you got to read that in context. Now, I actually pulled that out of the whole thing. Now, I know it's a lot of text on the page, but I was afraid if I broke this up, it might miss the point. So I put all this text on one page because there's an important point to make here. So let's look at the yellow part. First it says, when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, you know that the destruction thereof is not. Now, many people that don't understand Bible prophecy, don't understand the things that are coming, that are short-sighted, they see that and they say, oh, that happened back in 70 AD when the Romans surrounded Jerusalem and sacked it. Well, that is true. That is when it happened. But that's not what it's talking about. Oh, yes, Stan, you got proof of that? Yes, I do. Look at verse 22. And these be the days of vengeance. If you look up the word vengeance throughout the Bible, and I have, it is almost always talking about one thing. It's talking about the day of the Lord, the day Jesus returns, on the Feast of Trumpets for Armageddon, with the morning star to burn up all of the tares. Let them who are in Judea flee to the mountains. That's the same thing. The woman flees into the wilderness for 1,260 days. Okay, so I'll skip that. I started going a little bit more. Let me skip on here. Okay, so go down to verse 24. Here's where it says Jerusalem would be trodden down of the Gentiles till the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So what that was saying is at 70 AD, Jerusalem would start being trodden down of the Gentiles, but there's a time coming when the Gentiles are removed from Jerusalem. My opinion, that happens the last 3.5 years. It might only happen the last 100 days of the tribulation. It's not there yet. But that's what the dream was talking about earlier. It's saying that there's a time coming when the last 3.5 pages of the book of life for the Gentiles will be filled. Then he will go to the book of the Jews. That's the reason it says a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see the heart, not the oil and the wine. Meaning, from in the last 7 years, that's what it's saying, 3/4 of the people saved will be Jews. God's attention will turn from the Gentiles to the Jews. He's been with the Gentiles 2,000 years, and they've turned their back on him. Then he turns to the Jews. Now, let me go on. Another way we know that this is not talking about 70 AD is verse 25. Then there shall be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Well, that's not 70 AD. And upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. The sea and the waves are roaring, men's hearts failing for fear, for looking into those things that are coming upon the earth. What's that? That's talking about the very last days. That's the last week before Jesus returns. Then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Why is he coming with power and great glory? Because he just left the marriage supper, where he was crowned King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. He was given all power in heaven and earth. There, he does not have all power in heaven and earth now. He's given it, but he hasn't received it. Not until he goes to the coronation or the marriage supper, which we get to sit and watch. If you have your lamp and if you have your oil and you're burning bright, you get to see that. Last page, our last scripture. When these things begin to come to pass, look up and lift your head. Meaning, until we see Jerusalem surrounded by the armies, Jesus is not coming for Armageddon. Yes, he's coming before then, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the return of Armageddon here. These will be the days of vengeance. That's what he's talking about. Okay, so the whole point is communism, bad, capitalism, good. If you don't want to lose your life's savings, if you have an IRA or a 401k, the thing to do is call 800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD. These folks are Christians, and they specialize in helping people not lose their life savings in the event of a stock market crash and things like that. Look, most of the 401ks, most of the IRAs are in paper, backed by paper, and as Lindsey Williams says, if it's in paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. You can lose it all. 1-800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD. Hey, give them a call. Doesn't hurt, doesn't cost you anything. See if they can give you some good advice.